we kind of thought about, different considerations to take into mind as we go through the different models. But really, there's some overarching considerations that we just cannot ignore. You guys have to be on top of this right now because it's going to hit us fast and furious, I have a feeling. Okay, so some of the overarching considerations we're going to have. How will McKinney-Vento students be prioritized for restricted resources such as seats on buses? You guys have some different ways that you can provide transportation to those students. It doesn't have to be on school buses. Oops, where'd my stuff go? It doesn't have to be on school buses. We have, gas reimbursement. You guys can use your Suburbans. You can use public transportation. We have some different ideas. Okay. How will local policies be reviewed to ensure that they do not create barriers for McKinney-Vento students? I know policies, right? But if you guys have policies in place that are actually creating barriers, you have to look at them because we need for these students to be in school and doing the best they can to succeed and graduate. Okay, what outreach will be in place to re-engage students and families who have fallen away from the school? We know that was a huge issue last spring when this whole thing hit. We have some of the families that are completely off the grid. How do we get them back? How will you reach families eligible for McKinney-Vento services for the first time? Again, they might not even know that they're eligible for these services. Okay, next. Again, how will different models impact credit accrual? Our students move around quite a bit. They can move anywhere from 2 to 9 times a year. What is that going to do to their accrual, especially if you guys all have, you're able to make your own decisions about how you want to do those things. So how is that going to impact our students? What conflicts might arise for students in school of origin situations when LEAs are using different models? Wow, that's going to be tricky, guys. How might varying models impact childcare in and out of shelters? Don't forget about our kids that are in shelters. I'm talking about our kids in our domestic violence shelters, in our youth shelters and family shelters all across the state. Don't forget about them because they definitely have the same rights and they need the same services. So, how will schools address trauma, social emotional learning, and equity? Keep in mind that this pandemic has been different for different people. For me, it's been not necessarily fun, but I've never been able to work from home. It's been a great experience for me, but somebody that was already living in a really hard situation, we know that there's already been a lot of domestic violence, substance abuse, all different kinds of abuse going on. So I think our kids might have had a worse experience than some of their stably housed peers. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. It will be important to maintain consistency of the model throughout the school year for the benefits of the students, parents, and staff, because we know stability is good for our students, but how do we promote stability while we are constantly changing through different models ourselves? All right, did we miss any considerations? Go ahead and type that in the chat right now.
I will. So in our group, this is Tana Burgos from Rio Rancho Public Schools. I think it's important for everyone to know that the child care, that was a question that was there, that there was a memo that just went out by the PED that said that school districts can have child care on their campuses and they can forgo the CYFD licensure and that type of thing during this time. And so I think that's important for all districts to know that they have that capability to also work with their child care providers in their community as well, or they can have it on their campus. I don't know who all has seen that yet, but it did go out.
Thank you for sharing that, Tana. That's a really big deal. If you don't have some place to be, school is a good place to be, especially with safety and extracurricular activities and food. Good stuff. All right, who else wants to share out?
I'll share out from our group. I mean, you were there, but we just talked about the different strategies of making connections, some kind of SEL connection. And we talked about how the use of a phone would be very helpful, and how just tricky it's going to be to make this equitable, and that we all have to like think out of the box and work together to try to make it as equitable as possible for everyone.
Thank you. Okay, that works for me too. I know this is pretty overwhelming, isn't it? I mean, there's really a lot to think through. Okay, so let's jump back into our presentation. I want you guys to know I'm not leaving you high and dry, make you think about all these things without leaving you without a resource. We have an awesome resource guidance available for you guys. It is super intricate, it's super detailed, it's still easy to read. New Mexico Appleseed developed it for the New Mexico Public Education Department. I put a link up here for you. Also, it's in your attachments along with some forms that go with it. This is the best guidance in the country right now, and I'm not just saying that because, you know, I'm trying to pat my own back. It literally is. We don't have any guidance from the U.S. Department of Education at this point. So we have a few resources. So New Mexico Appleseed was able to put all of that together for us. And I just want to hit the highlights with you. I don't want to keep you on here forever, but there's some really good stuff in here and you guys need to look at it. Okay, so the framework for this whole thing is, you know, looking at homeless liaison and what their actual responsibilities are, and if they have the capacity to do it, because there's a lot to be done. It's talking about also asking about students' housing status at enrollment process. That's going to be your best practice. That's going to be your screener, so you can find these kids right up front so that you can get them what they need immediately. Providing those legally required services and waivers for fees related to birth certificates, class materials, extracurricular activities, field trips if we ever get to have them again in our lifetime, and before and after school programming to our students that have been identified. And then also talks about ensuring that any distance learning offered is available to identified students, you know, specifically with regards to the devices and Wi-Fi themselves. So let's go ahead and go to the next. Okay, so there is a tool there for you guys to assess the liaison's capacity. It's a clean little tool. It'll help you decide if maybe you're the right person or not the right person, and if you are the right person, what we can do to help expand your capacity. It talks about designating school site level liaisons to increase the school's overall capacity to respond to homelessness. It talks about, you know, taking into consideration your turnover rate, especially right now. You know, we have a huge turnover rate, and making sure that your homeless liaison is receiving that required training that they have to take. For those that had to suffer through the first two, I want you to know I'm really sorry. I know it was very challenging. It wasn't challenging, but it was lengthy, and it's a real course, but we've refined it. I heard you guys loud and clear. It was too much, so we've refined the process, but still a new homeless liaison needs to receive that training in order for them to be able to do the job appropriately. Okay, and that's through me. If your homeless liaison doesn't have that, get in touch with me. And then there's tons of online resources for the homeless liaisons to be able to provide professional development to school staff and to their community partners. You know, all staff are important. Teachers, coaches, bus drivers, maintenance workers, administrators, cafeteria staff, they all know the students in a different way and can help us identify those students. Okay, next. Okay, identifying students eligible for McKinney-Vento services. I'm telling you guys, the homeless liaison and other school staff have to reach out to the known or suspected McKinney-Vento students now to help prepare for reentry for school next year. If you're waiting until they walk, you know, till school starts, you're going to be at a loss on how you're going to be able to best help them. Again, we're talking about using that school registration as an opportunity to ask questions about housing status. This has been a best practice for a long time. Most of you guys hopefully are using the New Mexico enrollment form. It asks basically Do you rent or own your own home? If you don't, are you living in one of these situations? And all of those situations are qualifying McKinney-Vento situations. So, but let's think outside. I always call it thinking outside the backpack. Let's think outside the backpack a little bit more. Next slide. So here are some ways. You guys know your community. You don't have to just leave it to those questions, those typical questions, although those, you know, that'll get to it. But if you really want to kind of tease it out a little bit more, you can ask some of these other kind of questions. Are you staying temporarily with friends, relatives, other people with a parent? Same question without a parent, so we can get to our unaccompanied homeless youth. Are you staying at a shelter with a parent, without a parent, and transitional housing with a parent, without a parent? Of course, motel, camper, car tent, all of our usual suspects. And then the last one, at home in my bed. That's a student that isn't going to qualify as McKinney-Vento, most likely. Okay, next slide.
Hey, also, Dana, we have someone that asked if you could, or maybe this would be Veronica, if you could please resend the web's page out to them, please.
Sure.
And another question, what is a fifth wheel?
So that's going to be,
Somebody's like that doesn't have camping experience, so.
So this is Dana Sue Malone's super generic answer to that. So really, it's kind of like your families that are living in the RV, camping RV sort of situations, not the nice luxury ones that, you know, rock stars travel around. And I'm talking about a place that's fun to camp for a week, but not fun to live in for a whole entire year. Literally a camping trailer. Okay. So you guys, don't be afraid to get more creative. Again, we're going to have some families that have never identified as homeless before. They might not even understand that this law exists. So you really want to be creative with questions that can help them identify their students and families, you know, that might be experiencing homelessness because of COVID-19. So here's a little more creative ways to get to it. Have you ever had an eviction deferred? If so, when will the eviction moratorium end? We know that that's going to hit us pretty soon. Have you had rent or utility payments deferred? And if so, when will those payments resume? That's a shaky situation. Do you have steady income? Has your work schedule been reduced? Do you have a working stove and refrigerator? Have you had your utilities cut off now? A lot of them haven't yet, but maybe by school, the time we actually get into school, that might be a different reality for our families. How long have you been where you're staying currently, and how long do you think you'll be able to stay there? Have you recently had to move in with family or friends because of financial circumstances? I can guarantee that question is going to be the number one way that we're going to be able to find those families. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I talked with a charter school director the other day. He was telling me that, you know, they've asked the question about, has your housing situation changed because of COVID since last year? And they feel like a third of their population might qualify as McKinney-Vento for this upcoming school year. So if you're a homeless liaison, I mean, I'm the only person in my position at the state level. I'm the only one who does my job. And it can get really hard for me. And I'm not providing case management services. So I know it's a challenge for you guys as the homeless liaison to be able to do everything that you need to do for these families, and probably still not even being able to scratch the surface a lot of times, because these are really complicated, complex situations. So we want to make sure that the homeless liaison actually has the capacity to do their job. So you might want to consider, you know, you guys wear a lot of hats in your LEAs a lot of different times, especially our rural communities. But if you know that your homeless population is going to increase, you might want to increase your homeless liaison's hours so that it can reflect and they're actually able to do what they need to do. So you could consider using your Title I homeless Part A set aside for that purpose. You definitely want to kind of, if you have one homeless liaison and they don't have a team of people working with them, you want to create a team to help work with them and support them. So for me, I'm always thinking about school counselors, principals, paraprofessionals, social workers, and teachers. You know, you can't do this all alone. It's impossible. Use all available means of communication to reach your families and students. You know, email is a good way, phone, texting, regular email, Facebook, all the other, you know, new things that we do. But I really want to, you know, stress the fact that our families really need that warm touch to engage them back into school and to make them feel comfortable telling you what their needs are. So I would prefer, honestly, that you guys get on the phone. You know, if you can do home visits safely, maybe perhaps, but you want to make that warm connection with them. Hey, I'm thinking about you guys. Is there anything I can do for you? Okay, so we have a lot of families that haven't responded. Don't give up on them. Reach out to the emergency contacts, ask if they have any updated information. Maybe some of the students' friends, you know, they could try to get in touch with them. And while we're talking about this, you have to still keep in mind FERPA, right? So you wouldn't want to send out a mass email to all the parents that have students that are identified as homeless with a survey or something like that. That would breach confidentiality. Okay. So once you connect with a parent or a youth, you want to stay in touch with them on a regular basis. We've created some forms for you that are check-ins. They're basically just, you know, how's your housing status? Or do you need any of these educational supports? Is there anything in the community I can link you up with that you might need? You're keeping in constant contact with them because we don't want to lose them. Okay, and then something that you guys could consider, I think it's kind of a cool idea, is set up a phone hotline for assistance with any needs or connect families with existing hotlines. That's pretty creative, and I bet you it'll be used. Okay, so outreach again, if we're thinking about delivering food supplies or learning packets, making sure you're asking them again, what else do you guys need? Is there anything else I can help you with? Can I bring it right now? You know, we really want to make sure they have what they need. Providing parents and youth with technology they need to stay in touch. This is a prepaid cell phone. I know you guys are thinking, really, we got to buy our families prepaid cell phones? Well, if they're homeless, they might not have one. And if they're a homeless youth, they might not have one. How in the world are they going to be able to keep in touch with you and let you know if they need anything if they don't have them? Please consider that as an option. And be sure you guys are always letting students and families know about their educational rights, because it is literally the law, and we have to make sure that we're following it. Okay, so we've got our new families that are returning, and they are newly eligible for McKinney-Vento. What do we do? Okay, well, you guys, you know, kind of that idea that the posters that we always have to have hanging in our schools and stuff, you guys can also take that information, put it right on flyers, brochures. You can have posters. You know, you want to make sure that it has your homeless liaison's contact information on there, because they need to get in touch with them, and they're not going to know that unless you guys provide that information for them. So, you know, a great place to do that would be to utilize your website for that information, or, you know, social media. I know a lot of parents seem to respond well to Facebook. That would be another place to capture that. Now, you're really wanting to ask those kinds of questions. Has your housing situation changed because of issues related to COVID-19? If so, please contact whoever your homeless liaison is. Another way that we can help get these families into the services and into get the educational supports their students need is to ask our community partners to use an online referral form. And we have all of that for you guys in this manual that was created. Everything is right there for you. Okay, go ahead next. Okay, so you're thinking about your enrollment systems. Of course, it's going to be online, I'm assuming at this point. I don't know if you guys are doing any in person or anything, but you definitely want to think about what our families and youth that are experiencing homelessness, what kind of barriers they might experience to your enrollment. So if you're you're going to ensure immediate enrollment. So if it's going to be online, make sure that there's not going to be any issue with them being able to access online to register. So ensure that registrars and other enrollment personnel are McKinney-Vento savvy. You know, if the people who are handling the enrollment don't know that a student doesn't have, if they're homeless, doesn't have to have their enrollment paperwork when school starts, then they might turn those families away and we might lose them forever, especially our unaccompanied youth. Ensure online enrollment systems are accessible and understandable to parents and youth experiencing homelessness with information about the McKinney-Vento Act. Got to let them know what their rights are. Here's our friend School of Origin again. It is really one of the most important pieces of McKinney-Vento because we don't want our kids to move schools if they don't have to. And then also ensuring that contact information for the homeless liaison is available in multiple different ways. Again, there's some more thoughts to go with this. You know, making sure that your website provides easily accessible pathway. You know, you don't have to dig through several different layers to get to the homeless program. Make sure it's prominent so it's easy to see. Make sure that, you know, if they're doing it all online, that proof of residency, legal guardianship, and other things like that aren't holding them up. You know, you could consider making convenient alternatives to online enrollment for students and families, because if they don't have a computer or a phone that has internet access, they might need to do it personally or have some other ways of doing their enrollment. And I kind of really love this idea, create mobile enrollment stations by equipping buses with laptops, internet, and staff at peak enrollment periods. If you guys haven't considered that, I think that's really beautiful. Buses can park in areas where homeless families and or unaccompanied youth are concentrated. How easy is that, right? Now you guys are definitely wanting to take into consideration the health concerns for our kids, you know, PPE, their hygiene, clothing, and laundry. They have a problem accessing all of those sort of things. So how are you going to take that into consideration? You guys can totally use your Title I homeless set aside. You can use your CARES Act funding. Some examples of things that you might want to take into consideration is planning for and coordinating how to provide meals and technology. Of course, we've talked about that already. Purchasing educational technology, including hardware, software, and connectivity for students. Mental health services and supports, ensuring access to summer learning and after-school programming, and ensuring that students have equitable access to all activities, whether online or in person. Okay, next. Mental health is a huge deal. Our kids, everybody's been stressed out, but our kids, I can guarantee, have dealt with more stress than we have ever dreamed of during this whole ordeal. So, you know, you might want to consider screening for trauma when they come back to school. This manual has a lot of different resources you guys could consider. You know, ACEs, what is it? Adverse childhood experiences, those different kinds of things. Take a peek at this because it is really good stuff. Again, we've already kind of talked about a little bit about adopting positive school model practices today. You know, you want to make sure that we're avoiding detention, suspension, and expulsion for our kids and giving them options that are more trauma informed, because our kids, you know, are carrying a lot more around with them than most kids do. And so it's kind of a little monkey that's always on their back. All right, next. Access to distance learning. This is probably the biggest piece we need to focus on right now. You know, you got to make sure that they have internet, they've got devices, meals and academic supports and adult mentorship, sure. But if they don't have the basic thing like a computer, internet access, they're definitely not going to be successful right now. So we want to prioritize our students with unlimited high-speed data. And that can be done through hotspots and cell phone hotspots and minutes and data, so they can stay connected to homeless liaisons, teachers, and mentors, and they're able to complete their assignments. We want to plan on to meet learning challenges beyond basic connectivity and devices. You know, think about it. If some of our students are living in a place where they don't have electricity, portable chargers might be an answer to address that lack of electricity. You know, we might have to offer some in-person or virtual supplemental academic support because they need a little bit more. And it is really going to be important to maintain mentorship, you know, maybe not an official mentor, but making sure that there's a caring adult related to helping the student make good choices about their education and other things. You know, that's really important. I've heard so many youth talk over the years that have successfully completed high school, and they always will tell you there's one person there that made a difference. They always checked on me. They never would let me give up. Be that person. And then also something you guys really need to take into consideration is probably getting some insurance for our devices, because some of them might go walking, some of them might end up broken, but you know, just know that that's probably going to happen, and be prepared for it. Do you guys have any questions for me? I really gave you a lot of information. Don't worry, there's resources for you. It's about a 20-page manual, but there are a million resources inside of it. Give it a whirl, you won't be disappointed.
Dana, there is a question about how to buy a prepaid phone.
Well, you guys could use, you know, if you're asking about funding, you could use, you know, Title I homeless set aside. You could use McKinney-Vento subgrant if you have that. You could use a lot of different funding streams for it. I feel like you might even be able to use maybe your Title IV funding for that. Is that the question you're asking me?
All right. Well, thank you, Dana, for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you.